The frozen moon of Cowra 7 sat at the very edge of human-controlled space, a ball of ice and rock that most star maps barely bothered to name. And on its surface stood a small research outpost that looked like nothing special at all. War. Commander Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, and studied the holographic display before him with satisfaction, his yellow reptilian eyes narrowing as he examined the tiny human installation below. 12 life signs, his sensor officer reported. Minimal defensive systems, no military vessels in the sector, and the nearest human colony is 3 days away at maximum speed. Thrax's scale blips pulled back in what passed for a smile among the Velnorian people, revealing rows of sharp teeth that had evolved over millions of years to tear through flesh and bone. "This is almost too easy," he said to his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Krath, who had served in dozens of conquest campaigns across the galaxy. The Velnorian Dominion had been expanding for centuries, swallowing smaller species and claiming their worlds as tribute planets. And now they had turned their attention to humanity, a young species that had only recently joined the galactic community. The High Council wants to test these humans before we commit to a full invasion, Thrax continued. And this outpost will serve as our first lesson in human weakness. He had brought 12 warships and 3,000 soldiers for what should have been a simple operation. But Thrax believed in overwhelming force, and he had not risen to his position by taking unnecessary risks. "Deploy 500 soldiers to the surface," he commanded. "Secure the facility and capture the humans alive if possible. Since the scientists back home want specimens to study." The landing craft descended through the thin atmosphere of Cowra 7, their hulls glowing faintly from the friction, and inside them sat rows of Velnorian warriors in full combat armor, each one eager to prove themselves against a new enemy on the surface below. Commander Jack Morrison watched the approaching ships through the reinforced window of the outpost command center, his weathered face showing no emotion as he counted the enemy vessels. "Looks like we have company," he said calmly. Turning to face the 11 other humans in the room, Lieutenant Lisa Grant looked up from her tactical display and raised an eyebrow, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail that she always wore during operations. 500 hostiles in the first wave, she reported, with another 2,500 in reserve on those ships. Above us, Sergeant Sam Turner checked his medical kit one more time, his large hands moving with practiced efficiency as he organized supplies he hoped he would not need. 12 against 500, he said with a slight grin. "I've seen worse odds." Corporal Kate Lawson was already assembling her sniper rifle, a custom weapon that she had carried through a dozen classified operations on worlds that officially did not exist. "I count at least 30 officers in those landing craft," she said quietly. "Want me to start with them?" Specialist Danny Cole sat hunched over his communications equipment, his fingers dancing across holographic keyboards as he prepared electronic countermeasures. "I'm ready to jam their frequencies on your command," he said. "And I've already found 3 vulnerabilities in their encryption." Morrison nodded slowly and looked at each member of his team. These warriors who had trained together and bled together and trusted each other with their lives. They were not researchers. And this was not a simple scientific outpost, they were Spectre Unit, the most elite and most secret special operations team that Earth had ever created. And they had been stationed on Cowra 7 for advanced, cold weather training exercises the rest of the galaxy did not know they existed. And Earth's own governments officially denied their existence. But they had prevented 3 potential wars and eliminated countless threats to humanity without ever seeking recognition or glory. "Listen up," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of 25 years of combat experience. "These Velnorians think they found an easy target, and they think they're going to capture a bunch of scared scientists." He paused and allowed himself a small smile. Let's show them how wrong they are. The team moved with silent efficiency, each member taking their assigned position as the Velnorian landing craft touched down 500 meters from the outpost. Lisa Grant led a 3-person team to the eastern tunnels, a network of passages that the outpost's original builders had carved through the icecade. Lawson climbed to her sniper nest in the communication tower, her white camouflage blending perfectly with the frozen landscape around her. Sam Turner and Danny Cole secured the command center, preparing it as a fallback position if things went badly. Morrison himself moved to the main entrance, where he would greet their unwelcome guests personally. Outside, the Velnorian soldiers formed into perfect lines, their commanders barking orders in their harsh language as they prepared to assault what they believed was a defenseless facility. "Remember your training," the lead officer shouted. "Humans are weak creatures from a mid-tier planet, and they will surrender as soon as they see our numbers." The soldiers advanced across the frozen ground, their heavy boots crunching through the ice as they approached the outpost's outer perimeter. They found the main gate unlocked and the outer buildings empty, which seemed strange but not alarming. "They are hiding inside the central structure," an officer reported through his communicator. "All squads converge on the main building." The first squad entered through the front door. 20 Velnorian warriors moving in tactical formation with their weapons raised. The hallway beyond was dark and silent, and their helmet lights cut through the shadows as they advanced. Then the lights went out entirely, and the darkness became absolute when the second squad arrived 3 minutes later. They found their comrades lying unconscious on the floor, every single one of them taken down without a shot being fired and without a single alarm being raised. The squad leader stared at the bodies in confusion, unable to understand what had happened. "Command," he said into his communicator, his voice trembling slightly. "We have a problem up in orbit." War Commander Thrax received the report and felt the first stirring of doubt in his chest. Something was very wrong on Cower 7, and he was about to learn a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. War Commander Thrax stared at the communication screen with growing frustration as report after report brought nothing but bad news from the surface below. "What do you mean they just vanished?" he demanded, his clawed hands gripping the arms of his command chair so tightly that the metal groaned in protest. Officer on the screen looked terrified, his scales pale and his eyes darting nervously as he tried to explain the impossible. "We sent 40 soldiers into the main building," he said, "and all 40 were found unconscious within minutes, with no wounds and no signs of what attacked them." Thrax had conquered a dozen worlds and had fought against species far more advanced than humans, but he had never encountered anything like this. "Send more troops," he ordered. "Flood that building with soldiers and drag those humans out." 200 more Velnorian warriors marched toward the outpost, their formation tight and their weapons ready. And their commanders had learned from the first failure they would not enter the building in small groups this time, and they would not underestimate their enemy again. But as they crossed the frozen plain, something strange began to happen. Officers started falling, one by one, dropping to the ground without warning as invisible death reached out from somewhere in the distance. "Sniper!" someone screamed, but no one could see where the shots were coming from. Kate Lawson lay perfectly still in her nest atop the communication tower, her eye pressed to her scope as she selected her targets with cold precision. She aimed for officers first, the ones giving orders, the ones keeping the formation organized. And each shot found its mark with mechanical accuracy. The Velnorian soldiers scattered, seeking cover behind rocks and ice formations. But the shots kept coming from angles that seemed impossible. "I cannot locate the shooter," a sergeant reported desperately. "The trajectory analysis makes no sense." Kate smiled slightly and shifted her position, moving to a secondary nest that she had prepared hours earlier. And the Velnorians who thought they had figured out her location found themselves Wrong once again, while chaos erupted on the frozen plain. Lieutenant Lisa Grant led her team through the eastern tunnels beneath the surface. These passages connected to a series of natural ice caves that extended for kilometers in every direction. And Lisa knew every twist and turn from weeks of exploration. "Contact ahead," whispered Corporal Jake Harris. The youngest member of her team, but a skilled close-quarters fighter, Lisa held up her hand and the team froze, listening to the heavy footsteps of Velnorian soldiers moving through a tunnel intersection just ahead. The aliens had discovered the cave network and had sent troops to flank the outpost from below. A smart tactical decision that might have worked against normal defenders, but Spectre unit was not normal. And these tunnels had become their hunting ground. Lisa made a series of hand signals and her team moved like ghosts, slipping through the shadows until they were positioned perfectly around the enemy. Patrol. The fight lasted exactly 7 seconds. 20 Velnorian soldiers went down without managing to fire a single shot. And Lisa's team vanished back into the darkness before reinforcements could arrive back in the command center. Danny Cole worked his electronic magic with growing enthusiasm. "I'm inside their communication network," he announced. "And these guys have terrible security." He began broadcasting false orders on Velnorian frequencies, sending squads in wrong directions and reporting phantom attacks from locations where no humans existed. Sergeants received commands to retreat while lieutenants received orders to advance. And the confusion spread through the Velnorian ranks like a virus. Sam Turner watched the chaos unfold on their tactical display and shook his head in amazement. "They're shooting at each other now," he observed. 2 squads just opened fire on each other because they both thought the other was human. Commander Morrison listened to the reports from his team and felt a grim satisfaction building in his chest. Velnorians had expected frightened scientists and had found something very different. And now they were learning why humanity's enemies learned to fear the shadows. He activated his communicator and spoke to his scattered team. "Good work, everyone. But stay sharp, because they'll adapt eventually. And we need to keep the pressure on until they break completely up in orbit." Thrax watched his invasion force crumble and felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare. Genuine fear. "Who are these humans?" he demanded, slamming his fist against his console. "These are not scientists." His intelligence officer approached nervously, a datapad clutched in his trembling claws. "Commander, I have searched our databases for any information about this outpost," he said, "and I found something disturbing." He handed over the datapad, and Thrax read the contents with widening eyes. "Spectre unit," he breathed, the words coming out as barely a whisper. The database contained only fragments and rumors. Stories gathered from species who had encountered human ghost soldiers and lived to tell about it. Tales of small teams that defeated entire armies, of warriors who moved through battlefields like spirits of death, of humans who seemed to know what their enemies would do before they did it. The Karathi sent 5,000 soldiers to capture a human ambassador, the intelligence officer continued, and Spectre unit eliminated them all in a single night, with no human casualties. Thrax felt the blood drain from his face as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He had not found an easy target, and he had not stumbled upon a weakness in human defenses. He had walked into a nightmare, and now his soldiers were paying the price for his arrogance. "Get me the high command," he ordered, his voice suddenly hoarse. "They need to know what we are really facing on the surface below." Morrison gathered his team in the command center for a brief meeting. "They know who we are now," he said, "which means they'll either run or get desperate. So we need to be ready for anything." Lisa Grant checked her ammunition and nodded firmly. "Let them get desperate," she said. "We've been playing defense long enough," Morrison smiled, a cold expression that his enemies had learned to dread. "My thoughts exactly," he replied. "It's time to remind them why they should have stayed home." The holographic display in the Velnorian High Command Chamber flickered to life, and the assembled admirals and generals stared at War Commander Thrax's face with growing concern. "Explain this failure," demanded Supreme Admiral Vectis, the oldest and most powerful member of the Council. "You took 12 warships to capture 12 humans, and now you tell me you are losing?" Thrax swallowed his pride and forced himself to speak calmly. "These are not ordinary humans," he said. "They are Spectre Unit, the most elite warriors their species has ever produced, and I request immediate reinforcements." The council members exchanged uncertain glances, and several of them pulled up data files on their personal screens. "Spectre Unit," Vectis repeated slowly. "I have heard whispers about them, but I assumed they were propaganda designed to frighten lesser species." "They are very real," Thrax replied, "and they are systematically destroying my forces with efficiency I have never witnessed." He transmitted his casualty reports and tactical recordings, and the council watched in stunned silence as footage showed Velnorian soldiers falling to unseen attackers. "How many humans are down there?" asked General Krenna, a veteran of countless campaigns who had earned her position through brutal competence. 12, Thrax answered. "Just 12. The silence that followed stretched for several long seconds as the council absorbed this information. 12 humans against 3,000 Velnorian warriors. And the humans were winning decisively. "Pull your forces back," Vectis ordered finally. "Regroup and reassess before you lose more soldiers to these ghosts." Thrax nodded and ended the transmission. But he knew that retreat would not be simple down on the surface of Cowra 7. Commander Morrison had anticipated this moment and had already set his next phase into motion. "Danny, what's the status of their communication with the fleet?" he asked. "They're trying to coordinate an evacuation," Danny Cole reported. "But I've introduced so much noise into their channels that half their orders are getting lost or corrupted." Morrison nodded with satisfaction and activated his team communicator. "All units. The enemy is preparing to retreat, but we're not going to let them leave easily," he announced. "Kate, I want you to focus on their transport pilots when they start loading troops." "Understood." Kate Lawson replied from her latest sniper position. "I've already identified the landing zones they'll use." Lisa Grant's voice came through next, calm and professional despite hours of intense combat. "My team has planted charges throughout the tunnel network," she reported. "If they try to use the caves for evacuation, they'll find some unpleasant surprises waiting." Morrison allowed himself a moment to appreciate his team. These warriors who had trained for years to become the best humanity had to offer, each of them had been selected from thousands of candidates, tested beyond the limits of human endurance, and forged into weapons of incredible precision. Lisa Grant had been a tactical prodigy, recruited from Army intelligence after she had designed operations that defeated enemies with minimal casualties. Sam Turner had served as a combat medic in 3 major conflicts, saving lives under fire while also eliminating threats with equal skill. Kate Lawson had set records in marksmanship that still stood unbroken, with confirmed shots at distances that most experts considered impossible. Danny Cole had been hacking into classified systems since he was a teenager, and the military had decided it was better to recruit him than to arrest him, and there were others, each one extraordinary in their own way, each one dedicated to protecting humanity from threats that most people would never know existed. "Commander, I'm picking up a transmission from Earth Command," Danny announced suddenly. "They've received our situation report." Morrison took the communication and heard the voice of General Patricia Hayes, the only person outside the unit who knew their true capabilities. "Spectre Actual. Reinforcements are en route, but will not arrive for 18 hours, she said. "Can you hold that long?" Morrison looked at his tactical display, at the chaos they'd already created among the Velnorian forces, and made a quick calculation. "General, we'll have this wrapped up in 6 hours. he replied. Tell the reinforcements to bring cleanup crews, not combat troops. There was a pause on the other end, and Morrison could imagine the general's slight smile. Understood, Spectre Actual, she said. Give them hell? The transmission ended and Morrison gathered his team for a final briefing. We've been defending this outpost for 8 hours, he said. And we've shown these Velnoians what happens when they underestimate humanity. He pulled up a holographic map of the battlefield, showing enemy positions, their own forces, and the terrain they had learned so intimately. Now we go on offense, he continued. We're going to hit them so hard that they'll think about this day every time someone mentions the word human. Sam Turner grinned and cracked his knuckles. I've been waiting for this part, he said. Lisa Grant was already studying the map, a tactical mind identifying weaknesses and opportunities. Their supply ship is poorly defended, she observed. If we capture it, we cut off their ammunition and medical supplies. Take it, Morrison ordered. Danny, I want you broadcasting our assault on every Velnorian frequency so their soldiers in orbit can watch their friends losing. Danny's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Psychological warfare, he said approvingly. I like it. Kate Lawson stood and checked her rifle one more time. How many officers do they have left? She asked. 37, Danny answered. Down from 112 when they landed. Kate nodded thoughtfully. That number is too high, she said simply. I'll fix that. Morrison looked at his team, at these incredible warriors who had chosen to serve in the shadows, and felt a surge of pride that he rarely allowed himself to express. Let's move out, he commanded. And remember that every species in this galaxy will eventually hear about what happens on this frozen moon today. The team dispersed to their positions, and the counterattack began. The Velnoians thought the nightmare was ending, but it was only just beginning. The counterattack began at exactly midnight local time, when the frozen surface of Caloris 7 was at its darkest and the Velnoian soldiers were at their most exhausted. Sam Turner had spent hours studying the moon's geography, and he had discovered something the Velnorians had overlooked entirely beneath. The ice lay a network of pressurized geothermal vents, natural formations that could erupt with devastating force if triggered correctly. Charges are set, he reported through his communicator. Just say the word. Morrison waited until the Velnorian troops had gathered in their defensive positions, clustering together for warmth and false security. Do it, he ordered. The ground erupted in a dozen places simultaneously, sending jets of superheated steam and chunks of ice blasting through. The alien formation soldiers were thrown into the air. Equipment was destroyed, and carefully constructed defenses became useless in an instant in the chaos that followed. Spectre units struck with precise and devastating efficiency. Kate Lawson had relocated to a position overlooking the main Velnorian camp, and she began eliminating officers with mechanical precision. One shot, one kill, over and over again, until the enemy command structure collapsed entirely. 12 officers down, she reported calmly. Moving to secondary targets, Lieutenant Lisa Grant led her team through the confusion toward the Velnorian supply ship, a massive transport vessel that had landed to provide ammunition and medical support. The ship was guarded by 50 soldiers, but those soldiers were distracted by the explosions and screaming and chaos erupting all around them. Lisa moved like smoke through their defensive line, her team following in perfect synchronization. They reached the ship's loading ramp without being detected and slipped inside while the guards stared at the destruction happening in the distance. The crew never saw them coming in 3 minutes. Lisa's team had secured the bridge, disabled the engines, and locked down every compartment containing weapons or supplies. Supply ship captured, she reported. Enemy crew detained and cargo secured. Danny Cole had taken position near the Velnorian communication array, and he was broadcasting everything on open frequencies, Velorian, Soldiers on the orbiting warships watched in horror as their comrades were systematically dismantled by an enemy they could barely see. "This is being recorded and transmitted to every ship in your fleet," Danny announced on the enemy channel, his voice calm and almost friendly. "Please feel free to surrender at any time." The psychological impact was devastating, and morale among the Velnorian forces collapsed faster than their defensive. Lines Commander Morrison personally led the final assault on the enemy command post. Where War Commander Thrax had established his headquarters, he moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, taking down every soldier who stood in his path with a combination of martial skill and tactical brilliance. Thrax watched him coming on the security monitors and felt genuine terror. For the first time in his long military career, this human was not young. His hair was gray, and his face was lined with decades of combat experience. But he moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. "Stop him!" Thrax screamed at his personal guards. "Kill that human!" 20 elite Velnorian warriors charged toward Morrison, the best soldiers that Thrax had kept in reserve for exactly this kind of emergency. Morrison did not slow down, and he did not hesitate. He met them head-on, using their numbers against them, turning their coordinated attacks into chaos as he slipped between them like water through rocks in 45 seconds. All 20 guards lay unconscious on the ground, and Morrison stood untouched in the middle of them. Thrax reached for his sidearm, but Morrison was faster, crossing the distance between them before the alien commander could even aim. "Your invasion is over," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "Order your remaining forces to stand down." Thrax looked into the human's eyes and saw no anger, no hatred, just cold professional determination. This was not a warrior driven by emotion or revenge, but a soldier doing his job with perfect efficiency. "You're just one species among thousands," Thrax said weakly. Trying to maintain some dignity, "The Dominion will send more ships, more soldiers." Morrison shook his head slightly. "No, they won't," he replied, "because after today, every species in this galaxy will know what happens when you attack humanity." He gestured toward the window, where the frozen battlefield was visible under the pale light of distant stars. "You brought 3,000 soldiers to capture 12 humans," Morrison continued. "And those 12 humans have defeated you completely, with 0 casualties on our side." Thrax's shoulders slumped as the full weight of his failure settled upon him. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Order your ships to withdraw," Morrison answered. "Leave your soldiers here and return to your Dominion with a message." "What message?" Morrison leaned closer, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Tell them that humanity is not prey," he said. "Tell them that we do not start wars, but we finish them. And tell them that if they ever threaten our people again, we will not stop at defending ourselves." Thrax nodded slowly and reached for his communicator. "All ships, this is War Commander Thrax," he announced, his voice heavy with defeat. "Initiate immediate withdrawal. Leave the surface forces behind and return to Dominion space on the orbiting warships." Officers stared at each other in disbelief. "Commander, we cannot abandon our soldiers," someone protested. "Those are my orders," Thrax replied. "And trust me when I say that the humans will treat our captured soldiers better than we would treat theirs." The Velnorian fleet began powering up their engines, preparing to flee from a battle they had expected to win easily. But as they turned to leave, they discovered one final surprise. Lisa Grant's team had not just captured the supply ship. They had also sabotaged 3 of the warships during the chaos of the battle. "Commander," the fleet's senior captain reported urgently, "we have disabled vessels. 3 ships cannot achieve faster than light travel." Thrax closed his eyes and accepted his complete and total defeat. The humans had thought of everything, and now even escape was not fully possible on the surface below. Morrison watched the fleet struggle to organize its retreat and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The message had been sent, and the galaxy would remember this day for generations to come. The sun rose over Kaura 7 for the first time in 30 hours, casting pale golden light across a battlefield that told a story of complete and total defeat. Human reinforcements arrived 6 hours after Morrison's final transmission, and they found exactly what he had promised: a battle already won and an enemy already broken. Admiral Patricia Hayes stepped off the transport shuttle and surveyed the scene with experienced eyes that had witnessed many conflicts, but nothing quite like this. Valnorian soldiers sat in orderly rows, their weapons confiscated, and their wounds treated by human medics who showed them more kindness than they had expected. Final casualty report, Commander Morrison said as he approached the Admiral. 1,847 enemy soldiers incapacitated, with approximately 70% taken alive and uninjured. Hayes nodded slowly, her expression a mixture of pride and amazement. "And your casualties?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "2 minor injuries," Morrison replied. "Sergeant Turner took some shrapnel from a geyser eruption, and Corporal Harris twisted his ankle in the tunnels. 12 against 3,000. Hayes said quietly. "And you won with 2 minor injuries." She shook her head and allowed herself a rare smile. "The Council is going to have a hard time believing this report." Morrison shrugged slightly, his humble gesture contradicting the incredible victory he had just achieved. "We had home advantage," he said simply, "and they underestimated us." Across the battlefield, the captured Valnorian soldiers were being processed and prepared for transport to a holding facility. War Commander Thrax sat alone in a makeshift detention area, staring at the ground with empty eyes that had witnessed the destruction of his military career. A shadow fell across him, and he looked up to find Lieutenant Lisa Grant standing over him with a cup of warm liquid in her hand. "It's called coffee," she said, offering him the cup. "Humans drink it for energy, but it also helps with shock." Thrax accepted the cup with trembling claws, surprised by this small act of kindness from an enemy who had every reason to hate him. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why show mercy to an invader?" Lisa sat down across from him and considered the question carefully. "Because we're not like you," she answered finally. "We don't fight to conquer or destroy. We fight to protect, and once the threat is over, we see no reason for cruelty." Thrax looked at the human woman, truly seeing her for the first time. She was smaller than him, physically weaker, from a species that had only been traveling among the stars for a few centuries, and yet she and her 11 companions had defeated his entire invasion force without breaking a sweat. "The galaxy will hear about this," he said. "Every species will know what happened here." Lisa nodded calmly. "We're counting on it," she replied. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the events on Kaura 7. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive chamber, their conversations buzzing with speculation and disbelief. "The evidence is undeniable," announced the council chairman, a tall being from a species known for their neutrality and wisdom. 12 human soldiers defeated 3,000 Valnorian warriors in direct combat. Murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates exchanged worried glances. The Valnorian Dominion had been a major power, feared throughout the galaxy for their military strength, and they had been humiliated by a handful of humans. "This changes everything," whispered the ambassador from the Karathi Empire, remembering his own species' disastrous encounter with human special forces. "We need to reconsider our expansion plans," agreed his neighbor from the Tresh Collective, quietly canceling a planned incursion into human territory. In the back of the chamber, a Valnorian diplomat stood and requested permission to speak. The chamber fell silent as he approached the central platform, his scales pale and his posture humble. "The Valnorian Dominion wishes to formally request peace negotiations with the Human Confederation," he announced. We recognize that our actions were aggressive and unwarranted, and we seek to establish diplomatic relations. The human ambassador, a calm woman named Catherine Parker, rose from her seat and approached the platform. Humanity accepts this request, she said. We have never sought conflict with any species, but we will always defend ourselves when threatened. She paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives who had been considering their own aggressive moves against human colonies. Let Cower 7 serve as a reminder, she continued. Humanity prefers peace, but we are not prey, and those who mistake our kindness for weakness will learn a lesson they will never forget. The message was received clearly by every delegate in the chamber. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by traders and diplomats and journalists to every corner of known space species that had been planning raids on human outposts. Quietly abandoned their schemes, military leaders who had dismissed humans as a young and vulnerable species revised their assessments dramatically, and in dark corners of the galaxy, intelligence agencies added new files to their databases with a single warning. Do not engage Spectre Unit under any circumstances. Back on Earth, Commander Morrison and his team returned to their training facility, their identities still classified, and their existence still officially denied. They received no medals, no public recognition, no parades or celebrations, but they had accomplished something far more valuable than personal glory. 3 species have canceled planned operations against our colonies, General Hayes reported during their debriefing, and 16 others have requested trade agreements instead of military confrontations. Morrison nodded, satisfied with the outcome. That was always the goal, he said. Not to win wars, but to prevent them. His team gathered around him, these extraordinary warriors who served in silence and asked for nothing in return. What's next, Commander? Kate Lawson asked, already eager for their next mission. Morrison smiled slightly and pulled up a new briefing on his datapad. Another training rotation, he answered, this time on a volcanic moon in the Theta sector. Lisa Grant raised an eyebrow. And if someone decides to attack that outpost too? Then they'll learn the same lesson the Velnorians did. Morrison replied. He looked at his team, at these heroes who would never be known to the public, but who protected humanity every single day. We are Spectre Unit, he said, and we are humanity's first and last line of defense. In the years that followed, the story of Cower 7 became legend throughout the galaxy, and whenever aggressive species considered threatening human colonies, their advisors would pull up a file and say, before we proceed, let me tell you about 12 humans and a frozen moon. The operations were always canceled, and humanity continued to thrive among the stars, protected by warriors who asked for nothing but the chance to serve the end.